Swan Valley tree farmers, horticulturalists. For about 36 years we've been growing a range of food crops. The tree farming is on one particular property that is being really impacted by this rising groundwater. Thank you, Sally, for putting that so clearly. I hope after hearing Sally, you all agree that water runs downhill, water runs through sand and over clay, because we're not talking Yanshire here, we're talking about the duplex soils of the western flank of the Swan Valley, and we see that soil type all the way up to, all up through the northeast urban growth corridor. And of course the river is the lowest point in the landscape. Now, if we accept those three premises, as we do, then I believe our trouble started, and I'm not going to be pulling punches here, I want to be quite as nice as Sally, unfortunately, because we're seeing such a lot of damage. I believe our trouble started when a town planner was able to roll out hard urban surfaces uphill from a river valley without there being anything in our planning system to guarantee that the drainage delivery to take away the excess, the extra water created would be, and I'm sorry there's going to be puns, absolutely watertight. Our tree farm is evidence of the fact that it's not. So we'll give you the context. Rob, if you move the slide on. Here's the tree farm, if you can see it. The tree farm is actually 5 hectares of the 17 hectare property that's coloured in green. You can see the density of Dayton next door. Now I have to point out that Dayton is actually named after my granddad, Walter Day, and if you look at those honour rolls, his name features in the lists for both World Wars. It was said at the Statutory Planning Committee on the 1st of April that I was a part of an organised group that opposed development. So I had to email that planner the next day because, of course, in that forum I had no right of reply, and I said, you got that one wrong. We put my grandfather's name forward for consideration when Dayton was being considered. What we do oppose is essentially shoddy drainage that's delivered by planning on the run, and this is this fragmented planning system that we have to put up with. The other accusation was that we had no technical expertise, and I think Harry's going to shoot that down in flames, and Sally's used his data. And this is the message really to the northerners among us. This is the people north of us who are going to be facing the northeast urban growth corridor challenges. Start gathering your data now, because when push comes to shove, if it's just anecdotal hearsay, you'll be told all sorts of stories. Oh, it's been a wet winter. We've heard that so often. Oh, if you plant trees in a swamp, what do you expect? If anyone wants to challenge us on that, we'll meet you out behind the bocce courts after this event is over. Of course we didn't plant in a swamp, and we've got a picture coming up about that. Now, this is what used to be the view from our back paddock. Those trees, although they're not all endemic, it's the canopy that we were interested in, because that canopy helped control the naturally high groundwater. Once they went, and they go remarkably quickly, once they went, we'd lost our protection. And then, of course, the urban hard surfaces from that town planner, they get installed. Now, Rob, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we're going to take down a tree. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, that's more or less how quickly it happens, and it happens over and over and over again. And so that's our protectors gone. And this is what happened. That was 2022. Here's 2024 in Dayton. That's not right, is it? There's something wrong about that. Should all that water be there? The drainage designer claimed that there'd been a lot of irrigation of the public open space uphill and to the west. I don't believe all that water was due to irrigation of playing fields. There is actually a drainage basin underneath, you can't really see it, it's behind the fenced area there. That's basin A in a sequential series, A, B, C, D. And if we move on to the next one, this is the following year, 2025, it happens again. We believe that was happening more, it was more due to the fact that Basin B in the system is what I call, and still maintain, a dud. And therefore the water from Basin B backwashes into Basin A and floods the streets. Now, the worst of it is that those beautiful trees in the background, on the 1st of April, at that statutory planning committee meeting where it was alleged that I was anti-development, that block was approved unanimously to have an amendment that will now see 48 houses built on that block that is uphill from our tree farm. And I said to Admiral, didn't I, last week when we listened to his presentation, I said, should I be worried about that? And he seemed to be of the opinion, yes, we should be worried about that because it's uphill and it's the same drainage designer who has the gig for the drainage on that block that is yet to be developed. And we have a hydrogeologist report, the summary is over there on one of the boards, that says that the rising groundwater we're experiencing is beyond what would be expected due to seasonal or historical variation, and it's coming due to the management of water, that's the infiltration from the urban land upslope to our west. So that's pretty damning, actually. If we move on, and this was interesting too, because the drainage designer claimed that these were opportunistic photos. So I went through the memory on my camera. This is where the data is really useful. The ditch there on the left, I had an opportunity to take that photo from before August the 9th until after October the 29th. That's a light pole with groundwater around its base. Gather your data and keep it so you can answer when you get challenged, as you will. If we move on. Now this is the dud. I love Basin B. I talk about it all the time. It's like stand-up comedy. This is the one that doesn't work because water can't run uphill. Now, the designer claimed at the Statutory Planning Committee that the reason they had to modify their plan was because of the Dampier-to-Bunbury natural gas pipeline. The Dampier-to-Bunbury natural gas pipeline has been there since last century. It went in 1984. So I would have thought, although I'm not a hydrologist, I would have thought that any civil engineer charged with designing drainage in the vicinity of that pipeline, high pressure pipeline, would factor it into their design. Don't come and cry foul at a statutory planning committee meeting when that was there long before you lifted your pen or stylus or whatever they do. The other thing I found remarkable was that the drainage plan was approved, knowing that that pipeline was there. And the third thing that I found remarkable was that no one on the statutory planning committee that day called it out. They all just swallowed it up. So, of course, unfortunately, the hydrologist who sits on the SPC was absent that day, so couldn't presumably put in any input. And that hydrologist was also absent when Gratte Stage 3 was determined, the local structure plan. So I wonder what's going on. 2 pumps had to work to bypass the dud, Basin B, and they worked from mid-August until mid-October, and then the titles were released about 10 days later. So that's concerning to me. Okay, we move on. Oh, you can talk about this. Sure.
Yeah, I'll talk about that. Oh. Yeah, so this is the graph of the old tree stake. It's a bit short to use, so it'll do. And this is the graph of obviously depth to groundwater and the months, and these are 3 years, 2015, 2020 and 2025. And you can see that we've got every year. Sally had that one, but this is much simpler to read with only the 3 lines. So you can see up here, in the winter we've picked up about 1.3 metres of water table. And the rest of the year, the real dry stuff, we picked up a bit over 1 metre. Now when we planned the tree farm, we spent a long time there with a shovel digging holes in winter to see where the water was. This is 2013 and 14. We set where we would plant, knowing we had a metre to groundwater. Somebody's picked up the water table, so we now have got extensive flooding in 2025. We notified City of Swan in 2022, and it took until 2024. And you got the usual, the only person with a water problem. Anyone else? Don't pull. Lots of people. It's been really wet. We see these sort of variations all the time. This is natural, and just excuse after excuse. The City of Swan are the authority that approve the drainage plans, and after the developer's gone, they own the drainage plan. So our gripe, unfortunately, is with the City of Swan. I think some of the problem is the policies they've operated under, the particular designers to do these, and the government needs to step up.
Yeah, that just brings to mind the other disconnect is that DPLH, WAPC, they approve these urban developments, but it's the City of Swan who carries the can, because after a year the city inherits the drainage plan and then they're responsible for the maintenance. So that if there's a cock-up, as has happened here, we actually cop it twice as farmers, because we're losing productive land, but we're also ratepayers. And I imagine that people have been griping about the the increase in shire rates this year. Well, no mystery to us. And next slide, please, Rob. So this is what is happening right next door to the tree farm, or was in that August 27th. That's the beauty of taking photos, and you have to catalogue them, because otherwise we never remember what we thought we saw, So I have a system where it's the year, the month, the day. That's Basin D, and that is the back road behind our tree farm. So then what was happening at the tree farm, we see in the next slide the previous year. That depth to water was 21 centimetres on the fire break, across the road from where that water was spilling onto the road. Now, in 2025, that depth to water was 11 centimetres. And standing on that fire break was like trying to walk on a waterbed. It was really quite discombobulating. So that, of course, it went down quite quickly. It was quite reactive, but that's what we're dealing with. And if we look at the next slide, we see the impact that has. This is 2023. They're Casuarina requisitafolias, and they are second generation. We'd already sold one line of them. To the left, there's what we call the green belt, which is sort of a damp land that has been there, well, ever since I can remember. And there's an old well site at the top of that. So that's where the sand meets the clay, and the damp land sort of wraps itself around the sandhill. So that was where Harry dug these holes, to make sure it was okay to plant. For those of you still thinking, oh, they planted in the swamp. And you'll think that when you see the next slide. Okay, in the top slide is 2024. That's in August. That's how, it's hard to see. They were quite waterlogged, and you can see that the canopy is more sparse, that they look a bit crook. But not half as crook as they looked the following January, after that brutal summer that we had, because the roots, when those trees were removed, the roots were, looked at, and the bark was dead and sloughing off, and the roots were brown. Well, therefore they had no root capability to pull them through when things got tough. If we look at the next slide, I wonder then, looking at these coastal blackbutts, they were meant to be retained as part of Braddon Stage 3 in the public open space. They were dead before the ink was dry on that local structure plan. Looking at our situation on the tree farm, and knowing from photos Jan took, I think, these were flooded from the water from the earlier stages of Brabham over the previous winter. And then it looks, they're still carrying leaves, although they're dead, on the 17th of April. But then look at them in November, they're they've gone now. You might talk to this one because those trees are obviously dead, and there's a monitoring bore that was sent, the data was sent to us actually as evidence to try to convince us that the rising groundwater we're measuring is just typical of what's happening in the area. But they forgot to mention something quite important, didn't they, Harry?
Do you want an explanation of that?
Yep.
I'm loud enough? So this is for MN51A. It's in Bush River Site 200. It's between Dayton and Brabham. It's 150 odd hectares. It's a really important Bush River site. This is 1977 and this is 2025. And you can see we had what you see bores all over the Landcare Mound. Drying climate, less rainfall, high evaporation, water pumping, particularly on the Landcare Mound, but also some farmers over in this area. And so that's what you would expect, and you could say it was starting to level. Then Brabham went in and it went back up. So you've got all these indicators saying it should come down and then pick a new level, but then it's done the U-turn. And there's Berkshire woodland here. So here's perhaps the historical up here. If our historical gets there in the next few years, and it will, and it'll go above, it'll wipe out highly valued Berkshire woodland. And with that will go the understory, and then Portalingo will be all wildlife because we lost habitat and food source. And knowing our current government, they'll go, well, that's degraded bushland, it's useless. Thanks for making it that way. Let's put houses on it. Yeah, next.
Well, you don't actually. Well, you can.
Oh, yeah.
The other one. Yeah, put that. That brings to mind that we try not to be political. We have no allegiance with any particular political party because that political independence enables us to talk to everyone without fear or favour, because we realise now this problem is so huge that it's not going to be solved by the wave of a magic wand. But I do have to say we've had wonderful support from Anthony Spagnolo, who's here, and Brad Pettit, who may be here. They've been asking, really hammering the questions down in Parliament and putting ministers on notice. And so they give us a voice that we don't have. Our tree farm is actually in West Swan. So ask yourself, or do the research, who's the member for West Swan? Who's the local MP that we turn to? And we have... I'm not naming names, Kathy. My other feeling of discomfort comes when because our land is in the Swan Valley Landscape Protection Zone, it's zoned priority, it's zoned rural and classified as priority agriculture. If I have a problem with something happening on my land, you know, like rising groundwater, for instance, the contact at DPLH has the same name as that town planner who rolled out the plan for urban Dayton up the hill from us. And I don't know whether I'll be getting a good hearing from, if it is the same person. I'm not saying it's the same person, I'm saying it's someone with the same name. And you're all intelligent, you can do your research. So we're stuck in a bit of a bind, aren't we? The reason I put that slide up is Bush Forever we're all very fond of. It's immediately north of our tree farm. Professor Main up there in the top right corner, some of you here, Dr. Dolver will know, Dr. Cushling will know. He's been gone a long time now, but he started his formal education across the road in that little primary school. He must have thought enough of the school to come back when that school closed in the late 1980s, because he was outside this building when there was a big gathering in the hall. Now, one of the units he taught at uni when I was an undergraduate was, ironically, it was called the Management of Remnant Bushland. And because those concepts were very foreign to me, concepts like fragmentation, edge effects, diminished gene pools, I was just a teenager, you know, it was all new. So I would relate those foreign concepts to the bush that I knew, which was now, of course, it's called Bush Forever Site 200. Back then we just called it the bush. I wonder what he would make. He was one of the founding fathers of the EPA, the Environmental Protection Authority, and he really took a stand against things. I thought of him as a sort of quietly spoken gentleman, but he actually stopped an alumina refinery being built in Upper Swan. And I wonder what he would make now of the fact that the deputy chair of the EPA just happens to be the managing director of a town planning company, and that town planning company has the contract for Brabham Stage 3, and I understand also for North Ellenbrook East. Someone will contradict me, I'm sure, if I'm wrong. So yeah, I just wonder what he would make of that, and the way the whole, there's so much developer-centric loading on a lot of these committees. The reason the cute little tortoise is there is because I fear that if the mistakes that have been happening and affecting our tree farm aren't stopped, if this lunacy continues as this juggernaut rolls northwards, how can we protect the tortoises? Because our problems are coming from about 1 kilometre of urban hard surface. Up there, I think the North Ellenbrook development is something like 20 k's? Someone will know. Anyway, it's a lot more, so the effect is going to be far more cumulative, and I wouldn't be hanging my hat on any guarantees that buffer zones are going to protect it. Really, the work needs to be done now. You know, the monitoring boards need to go in, and in a way, the community needs to keep ahead of the planning. I feel with our situation that the community in the Swan has probably passed the level of knowledge in local government and even state government with this whole issue, because we're certainly not getting any traction. And so the kind part of me assumes this is due to ignorance. It would be terrible to assume that it was all just being allowed to happen and, you know, the Swan Valley can go to rot. But I do have to add that in January I did get a letter from Element, a town planning company, seeking expressions of interest on behalf of a West Swan landowner who chose not to reveal themselves, to see whether there was interest in urbanising a strip of land that includes our tree farm. So they got a fairly lengthy and sharp letter back, but there's always the wolves at the door. And you know, when I read degraded farmland, degraded bushland, I think, who's thinking future urban? Okay, so the next one, next slide. Yeah, Sally, you talked about the water going into Whiteland Park, and this terrible photo we took, and the call was made to someone who could help that animal. We made the walk before Cyclone Narelle dumped all that, you know, the prefrontal rain. So up until the day that photo was taken, our rain gauge says we'd had 3.9 millimetres from January the 1st to March the 26th. So that wasn't due to any rainfall. That's the rain coming, we believe, according to a PhD study that we read, coming from the earlier stages of Brabham. And while a little bit of extra water is probably a good thing in the short term, because it means things like the cygnets that are late hatchings, you know, they can, there'll be enough water for a takeoff point for them. But if this goes on, it'll change the whole eco-hydrology of the wetlands there. And of course, this wetland has to contend with the water that will be coming from Bennett Brook East, is it called? I can never remember it. Now, Harry used to, he with his family and others, he used to, from the age of, 10 you said, from a 10-year-old, he was out there around those paddocks mustering cattle, as I was out there too, because this land actually belonged previously to two lines of my family, the Whitemans and the Days. I don't ever remember water like that in March or through summer. So while temporarily it might be a good thing, and maybe I think if this goes on, and of course this is before Brabham Stage 3, just in the last week, the amount of trees that have been cleared in Brabham Stage 3 is heartbreaking. And a lot of those trees are melaleucas. They didn't have the necessary trunk diameter to give them any value in the environmental report, which had a lot of flaws in it. That's the other thing. If you start reading these reports, you might see that some aren't all that flash. Like the report that I'm referring to, it actually had an ecological linkage as extant between the Swan River and Whiteman Park. Well, that ecological linkage, that's been gone for years, because there's a train line that goes through it. There's no underpasses under that train line. There's Drumpellier Drive. So you really, for the northerners, again I'm speaking, you really have to scrutinise the planning documents that come out, and you may have more knowledge, or you may be able to see holes that others perhaps won't. But Harry, you think there could be a good side to that, don't you?
Yeah, well, it'll pick up the groundwater level, and Horse Swamp will have more water in it for longer. But the problem is, if you make it a permanent wetland, if you keep dumping more water in there, then you'll lose your open water. And it's only about knee deep, so the entire water body is a food source, particularly water birds, swans. They go down the bottom and they feed and they pop back up again. You cover it with water all year, it's going to turn into just it'll be a kikuyu and water cooch. There'll be no free water, and we might as well urbanise that. That's buggered too.
Managed aquifer recharge, though?
Oh, managed aquifer recharge, that one.
Yeah.
From Brabham stage 1, 84 hectares, there's 400,000 cubic metres of water per year. That's 400 million litres of water runs out of the drains. Now, it's good quality, low salt water. It should be put back in the aquifers. So you can't put it in the superficial. You put it in the shallow, it'll pop up somewhere else and cause flooding. It's got to go deep, which is leadable. And if you put it in leadable, you can then extract that water from Bullsbrook to Guildford to back in Malaga somewhere, because it's a big porous aquifer. The government at this stage aren't interested. If you're an engineer at Watercorp, you go, a few million cubic metres, don't worry about it, we'll just do another pipe on the desal plant. And so we need to get past engineering and start looking at managing the water we've got. And that's managed aquifer recharge.
So we've had.
Got the other one.
That's all right. That was on pause. I saw that. Okay, so we've had some of the science. We've seen some of the repercussions. We're just going to take a short break now for 10 minutes just to come for a break for a drink and the bathroom, and then we'll carry on with 2 more speakers about the repercussions and causes. Thank you.